6. Why Heiress? Spend £100 to buy a new mommy. Force Duke Daddy to marry the boy's pretty single mum. The bell above the dressmaker's shop door chimed softly as 6-year-old Lady Amelia Ravensley marched inside, her small boots clicking with determination against the wooden floor. She clutched a leather purse in one hand and a crumpled banknote in the other, her face set with the serious expression of someone conducting very important business. "I'd like to buy a mother, please," Amelia announced, laying £100 on the counter with a decisive thump. Nora Bell looked up from the pale blue muslin she'd been pinning on Mrs. Henderson, the vicar's wife, and felt the world tilt sideways. The banknote sat there like an accusation, crisp and impossible and completely real. "I beg your pardon?" Nora's voice came out strangled. Amelia pushed the money closer, as if Nora simply hadn't heard properly. "A mother. I need to buy one. Jamie has the best kind. So I want you." In the corner of the shop, 7-year-old Jamie Bell looked up from the wooden horse he'd been playing with, his eyes going wide with horror. "Amelia, you can't buy people," he hissed. "That's not how it works." "It is too how it works." Amelia pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, smoothing it carefully on the counter. "I have a contract and everything." Nora's hands trembled as she excused herself from Mrs. Henderson and moved to read the paper. The writing was crooked, painfully childish, but devastatingly clear. "I pay £100. You be my mama. You marry papa. We all live together. Signed, Amelia Ravensley." "Oh, sweetheart." Nora knelt down, bringing herself to Amelia's eye level. "Where did you get this money?" "From my trust fund," Amelia said it, matter-of-factly, as if everyone had trust funds. "Mr. Pemberton, Papa's solicitor, said my inheritance is quite substantial. That means I have lots of money. So I took some to buy what I need most." Nora felt sick. This was a duke's daughter, standing in her shabby village shop, offering a fortune for something that couldn't be purchased. Worse, she'd been watching them. Nora remembered seeing the little girl at church services, always sitting stiff and alone in the Ravensley pew, while other children squirmed beside their mothers. "Lady Amelia," Nora said gently, "I cannot accept this money, and I certainly cannot agree to marry your father. That's not how families work." "But why not?" Amelia's voice cracked. "You're nice. You make Jamie laugh. You kiss his cheeks and smooth his hair and read him stories. I've seen you. And Papa is very sad and very lonely. And governesses are always stern and hate when I ask questions. And I just want someone who will love me like you love Jamie." The raw honesty of it punched Nora in the chest. She'd been widowed for 2 years, struggling to survive on dressmaking commissions while raising Jamie alone. That £100 could pay 6 months' rent and clear the debts her late husband had left behind. It was more money than she'd see in a year of careful work. But accepting it would destroy her. A village widow taking money from a duke's daughter? The gossip would paint her as a schemer, a fortune hunter who'd manipulated a lonely child. Her reputation would be ruined, and Jamie would suffer for it. "Sweetheart, I need you to take this money back home." Nora tried to hand the banknote to Amelia, but the little girl stepped backward, shaking her head fiercely. "No, it's payment. You have to take it. That's how business works. Papa always says, honour your contracts." The shop door burst open with enough force to rattle the bell. A footman in Ravensley livery stumbled inside, breathing hard, his face flushed with exertion. "Lady Amelia?" He spotted the child and sagged with visible relief. "The entire household has been searching for you. His Grace is beside himself with worry." Then the footman's eyes landed on the banknote in Nora's hand, on the childish contract spread across the counter. His expression shifted from relief to suspicion in an instant. "What's this, then?" His tone had gone cold and formal. "What business does a dressmaker have with the Duke's daughter and her money?" Nora's stomach dropped. She could see exactly how this looked. "This isn't what you think. I'm buying a mother," Amelia announced proudly. "Miss Bell is going to be my new mamma, and she's going to marry Duke Daddy, and Jamie will be my brother, and we'll all live at Ravensley Hall together." The footman's face hardened. "I see. And did Miss Bell suggest this arrangement, my lady?" "No." Nora's voice came out too sharp. "I had nothing to do with this. Lady Amelia came here on her own with this money and this idea. I've been trying to return it." "Of course you have." The footman's scepticism was obvious. "His Grace will want to speak with you, Miss Bell. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Do not be late." He swept Amelia up, despite her protests, and carried her from the shop. Through the window, Nora watched him deposit the little girl in a waiting carriage, her small face pressed against the glass, looking back with desperate hope. Mrs. Henderson had fled during the confrontation, leaving her half-pinned dress behind. Nora stood alone in the sudden silence, staring at the £100 and the crooked contract still sitting on her counter. Jamie crept closer, his face worried. "Mamma, are you in trouble?" "I don't know, sweetheart." Nora's voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "I truly don't know." That night, Nora lay awake in their tiny room above the shop, staring at the cracked ceiling. The banknote sat on her nightstand, mocking her. The contract lay beside it. If she kept the money, she was a thief who'd taken advantage of a lonely child. If she tried to return it, and the Duke believed she'd solicited it, he could destroy her reputation with a single word. Village dressmakers had no power against dukes, especially dukes who thought their daughters were being exploited. But there was no choice, really. Nora had built her life on honesty and hard work. She wouldn't start compromising now, no matter how terrifying the consequences. She rose before dawn and dressed in her best day dress, a simple grey cotton that was respectable, if not fashionable. Jamie stirred as she moved around their small room. "Where are you going, Mama?" "To Ravensley Hall." Nora smoothed his sleep, mussed hair. "To return Lady Amelia's money and face whatever comes." Jamie's eyes were wide and worried. "Will the Duke be angry?" "Probably." Nora managed a smile she didn't feel. "But we'll survive it. We always do." They walked the 2 miles to Ravensley Hall. As the sun climbed higher, Jamie's small hand tight in hers. The estate gates loomed like the entrance to another world, wrought iron twisted into elaborate patterns that probably cost more than Nora would earn in her lifetime. The house itself was massive, all golden stone and endless windows, beautiful and utterly intimidating. A dozen chimneys reached toward the sky. Formal gardens stretched in every direction. This was wealth beyond imagining, and Nora was about to walk inside and tell its owner that his daughter had tried to buy her. God help them both. 2. The butler who answered the door looked like he'd been carved from ice and disapproval. His gaze swept over Nora's plain dress and Jamie's patched breeches with obvious disdain. "Tradesman's entrance is around the back," he said coldly. "I'm here to see His Grace." Nora lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "He's expecting me, Miss Nora Bell." Something flickered in the butler's expression. "Ah, yes, Miss Bell." He made her name sound like a disease. "This way." He led them through hallways that seemed to stretch forever, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors and furniture that gleamed with beeswax polish. Jamie pressed close to Nora's side, his eyes huge as he took in the grandeur surrounding them. They were deposited in the library, where floor-to-ceiling shelves held more books than Nora had ever seen in one place. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating leather chairs and a massive desk where papers sat in neat, organized stacks. "His Grace will be with you momentarily," the butler said, each word precise and cutting. "Do try not to touch anything." He left them standing there like criminals awaiting judgment. Jamie whispered, "Mama, that man doesn't like us." "Mr. Price doesn't know us, sweetheart. He's just protecting his master." Nora squeezed his hand. "Stay close and be polite." The door opened. Gabriel Ravensley, Duke of Ravensley, entered with the controlled precision of a man used to command. He was tall and dark-haired, probably in his early 30s, with grey eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to smile. Everything about him radiated restrained power and barely suppressed exhaustion. He stopped when he saw Jamie, his expression flickering with something Nora couldn't read. Then his gaze moved to her, cool and assessing. "Miss Bell," his voice was clipped, aristocratic. "I understand my daughter paid you a visit yesterday." Nora's hands trembled as she reached into her pocket and pulled out the banknote and contract. She laid them carefully on his desk, meeting his eyes with as much dignity as she could muster. "Your Grace, I have come to return Lady Amelia's money, and to make it absolutely clear that I did not solicit this arrangement. Your daughter came to my shop of her own accord with her own ideas. I refused her offer immediately and have been trying to return these items ever since." Gabriel picked up the contract, reading Amelia's crooked handwriting. Something painful crossed his face before the mask of ducal control slammed back into place. "And you expect me to believe you had no part in putting these ideas in her head? That a village dressmaker just happened to capture my daughter's attention, and she spontaneously decided to offer you a fortune?" The accusation stung, but Nora held her ground. "Believe what you wish, Your Grace. I came here to return your daughter's money, and to state clearly that I will not be brought to play at being anyone's wife. My reputation may mean nothing to you, but it means everything to me and my son." "Your son?" Gabriel's gaze moved to Jamie, who was trying very hard to look brave despite his obvious fear. "What's your name, boy?" "James Bell, Your Grace." Jamie's voice wobbled slightly. "But everyone calls me Jamie." "And how old are you, Jamie?" "7, sir. Your Grace, sir." Jamie stumbled over the proper address. Something softened infinitesimally in Gabriel's expression. Before he could respond, the library door burst open and Amelia flew inside like a small, determined hurricane. "Papa!" She spotted Nora and Jamie and lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. "You came! I knew you would. Did you bring the contract? Are we signing it today? Can Jamie see my room?" "It's very big, and I told him we could share. But the nursemaid said boys and girls can't share rooms, which seems silly because—" "Amelia," Gabriel's voice cut through her excited babbling. "That's quite enough." But Amelia was already grabbing Jamie's hand, pulling him toward the window to show him the gardens. "And there's a pond with frogs and stables with 6 horses, and a tree house that Papa built before Mama died, and—" "Amelia Louise Ravensley." Gabriel's tone was sharper now. "Come here. Now." Amelia reluctantly released Jamie's hand and approached her father, her expression shifting from joy to confusion. "Papa? Why are you using your angry voice? I found you a wife and Jamie a father. Aren't you happy? Now nobody has to be lonely anymore." The silence that fell was devastating. Nora watched Gabriel's face cycle through emotions too quickly to name shock, grief, guilt, anger, and something that looked like his heart breaking in real time. "Sweetheart," Gabriel knelt down, bringing himself to Amelia's level. "Is that what you think? That I'm lonely?" You are lonely, Papa. Amelia's voice was matter-of-fact, but painfully young. You work in your study until late, and you never smile anymore. And at dinner you sit at the big table all by yourself looking sad. And I'm lonely too. Governess Martin says children should be seen and not heard, and she never lets me ask questions. And she doesn't read stories with funny voices like Miss Bell does for Jamie. Nora saw the exact moment Gabriel's anger crumbled into something far more painful. He pulled Amelia into a fierce hug, his eyes closing as if against physical pain. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its sharp edge. Miss Bell, I apologize. It seems the fault here lies not with you, but with my own failures as a father. Nora's throat tightened. Your Grace? No. Gabriel stood, still holding Amelia. My daughter was so starved for affection that she attempted to purchase it. That speaks to my shortcomings, not your character. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal. However, we still have a practical problem. Your Grace? The servants saw you with that money yesterday. By now, half the village has heard that my daughter visited your shop with a substantial sum and a proposal of marriage. Your reputation will be destroyed if I simply send you away with nothing. Nora hadn't thought of that, but he was right. The gossip would paint her as either a schemer or a fool, neither of which would help her keep customers. Gabriel set Amelia down gently and moved to his desk, his expression thoughtful. I have a proposal, a legitimate one this time. I'm not marrying you, Nora said immediately. Despite everything, Gabriel's mouth twitched with what might have been amusement. I wasn't suggesting that, Miss Bell. I'm suggesting employment. Employment? Amelia clearly responds to you in ways she hasn't responded to any governess I've hired. And it's obvious that what she needs isn't more discipline, but more warmth. Gabriel's gaze moved between Nora and the two children, who were now whispering by the window. I'm offering you a position as Amelia's governess. You and your son would live here at Ravensley Hall. Jamie would be educated alongside Amelia as her companion. Both of you would receive fair wages and proper accommodations. Nora stared at him. You want me to live under your roof? Your Grace, that would only make the gossip worse. Not if you're an acknowledged employee with a defined role. Governesses live with their employers all the time. It's perfectly respectable. Gabriel's voice was carefully neutral. And Miss Bell, I'm not offering this out of pity. My daughter needs someone who will teach her more than deportment and needlework. Someone who will read her stories with funny voices and let her ask questions. I believe you could be that person. It was everything Nora needed. Steady income, a home for Jamie, education that would give her son opportunities she could never afford otherwise. But it was also terrifying. Living in a duke's household, constantly under scrutiny, knowing that one misstep could destroy them both. I have conditions, Nora said slowly. Name them. I will not encourage Lady Amelia's marriage plans. You must help me set boundaries with her and make it clear that I am her governess, not her prospective stepmother. Agreed. And I expect you to protect my reputation and Jamie's. If your family or your peers say things that could harm us, I need to know you'll defend us. Gabriel's eyes met hers with surprising intensity. You have my word, Miss Bell. No one under my roof will be mistreated. Not you. Not your son. Not even by me. Nora looked at Jamie, who was now showing Amelia how to make shadow puppets on the wall, the two children giggling together. She thought about their cramped room above the shop, about the debts she was slowly drowning in, about the future Jamie deserved, but she couldn't provide. Then I accept, Your Grace. Amelia's delighted squeal could probably be heard in the next county. She launched herself at Nora, hugging her waist with fierce joy. You're staying! Jamie's staying! This is the best day ever! Jamie looked at his mother with cautious hope. Really, Mama? We can stay here? Really, sweetheart. Nora smoothed his hair, her heart aching and hopeful in equal measure. We're staying. As Mr. Price was summoned to arrange their rooms and belongings, Amelia grabbed Jamie's hand and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, Don't worry, step 1 worked. Now we just have to make them fall in love. Jamie groaned. Amelia, that sounds like trouble. The best kind of trouble, Amelia assured him, perfectly pleased with herself. Gabriel caught Nora's eye across the library. For just a moment, his expression showed something almost like a smile. Then the ducal mask slid back into place, and he turned to give Mr. Price instructions in that cool, controlled voice that revealed nothing. But Nora had seen that flicker of warmth, and despite every sensible instinct screaming at her to guard her heart, she felt the first dangerous stirring of hope. 3 weeks at Ravensley Hall transformed Nora's understanding of luxury and loneliness. The rooms she and Jamie occupied were larger than their entire flat above the dress shop, with proper beds and wardrobes and a window seat where Jamie could read. The meals arrived on silver trays. Hot water appeared in copper tubs without her having to carry a single bucket. But the house itself felt hollow, like a beautiful shell with nothing living inside. Amelia's days had been structured around silence and stillness. Wake at 7, dress properly, breakfast alone in the nursery, lessons in deportment, French, needlework, speak when spoken to. Sit with perfect posture, never run, never shout, never question. Nora tore up that schedule on her second day. She mixed lessons with walks through the estate gardens, teaching botany by examining actual flowers rather than pictures in books. She moved arithmetic into the kitchen, where cook helped them measure ingredients for bread while learning fractions. She read stories by the fire in different voices, making Jamie and Amelia collapse with giggles. The staff noticed. Mrs. Fairweather, the head housekeeper, remarked to Mr. Price that Lady Amelia laughed now, that she'd seen the child running through the halls with young Master Bell, both of them shrieking with delight. And Gabriel noticed too. Nora became aware of his presence in doorways, watching quietly as she taught the children. She'd look up from a book to find him leaning against the music room frame, his expression unreadable, but his attention complete. Or she'd be supervising the children in the garden and catch him observing from his study window. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like he was slowly learning to be part of something he'd forgotten existed. The first real crack in his careful control came on a Thursday afternoon. Nora had organised a picnic in the orchard, spreading blankets beneath apple trees heavy with late summer fruit. She'd convinced Cook to pack sandwiches and lemonade, and the children were playing an elaborate game involving dragons and knights and a great deal of creative running. Gabriel appeared through the trees, still wearing his riding coat, his dark hair windswept. He stopped when he saw them, clearly intending to simply pass by without disturbing their lesson. "Duke Daddy!" Amelia spotted him and waved frantically. "Come play! Jamie is the dragon, and I'm the knight, and we need someone to be the wizard." "I'm certain your father has important business," Nora started. "Actually," Gabriel said slowly, surprising them both, "I find myself with a rare afternoon free, if Miss Bell permits." Something in his voice made Nora's chest tighten. He was asking permission to play with his own daughter, as if he'd forgotten how. "Of course, Your Grace." What followed was perhaps the most undignified hour of Gabriel's adult life. He chased shrieking children through the orchard, casting spells with exaggerated gestures. He roared dramatically when Jamie the dragon attacked. He let Amelia knight him with a stick, then promptly betrayed her to join the dragon's side, causing fresh squeals of outrage and laughter. Nora watched from the blanket, ostensibly supervising, but really just witnessing Gabriel Ravensley shed years of grief and control. When he laughed, actually laughed, deep and genuine, she felt her carefully maintained emotional distance slip dangerously. This man wasn't just a duke. He was a father who'd buried his heart with his wife and was only now remembering how to feel again. Dangerous. So dangerous. Later, as they walked back toward the house, both children chattering ahead of them, Gabriel said quietly, "Thank you." "For what, Your Grace?" "For reminding me what matters." He glanced at her, and Nora saw something raw in his expression. "I've been so focused on protecting Amelia from more loss that I forgot she needs more than just safety. She needs joy." "She needs her father," Nora said gently. "The real one. Not the Duke, but the man who just spent an hour pretending to be a wizard." Gabriel's smile was small but real. He's been absent for too long. Their eyes met and held for a moment too long. Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked away quickly, reminding herself firmly that this was her employer, nothing more. But the boundaries were already beginning to blur. Dinner became less formal. Gabriel started joining them in the family dining room rather than eating alone in solitary grandeur. Amelia insisted Nora sit beside him, so Papa isn't lonely at the head of the table, and Gabriel didn't countermand the request. They talked about estate business, about the children's progress, about books and ideas. Gabriel asked Nora's opinions on tenant concerns and seemed to actually listen to her answers. She found herself forgetting to be intimidated by his title, responding to him as simply Gabriel, a man trying his best. The cracks in propriety widened. One evening, Nora was putting the children to bed when Amelia forgot her favourite shawl in the garden. By the time Nora retrieved it and was walking back through the twilight, Gabriel was there, clearly having been brooding on the stone bench. "Miss Bell." He stood quickly. "I didn't expect. That is, I was just thinking," Nora supplied, amused by his sudden awkwardness. "Something like that," Gabriel gestured to the bench. "Join me, just for a moment." Nora knew she shouldn't, knew that sitting alone with him in the gathering darkness was exactly the kind of situation she'd promised to avoid, but she sat anyway, leaving a careful space between them. They talked about nothing important: the weather, the harvest, Amelia's progress with her reading. But underneath the ordinary words ran something else, a current of awareness neither acknowledged but both felt. "My wife died when Amelia was just 6 months old," Gabriel said suddenly, his voice low. "Childbed fever. I loved her desperately, and when she died, it felt like my soul was ripped open. I couldn't bear to love anyone that much again, so I buried myself in work and tried to be a good duke instead of a good father." Nora's throat tightened. "I understand. My husband died 2 years ago. Illness. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy, and losing him felt like losing my anchor. I've been adrift ever since, just trying to keep Jamie safe." Gabriel turned to look at her, really look at her, and Nora felt stripped bare under his gaze. "You're stronger than you know, Miss Bell. So are you, Your Grace. You just forgot for a while." The space between them felt charged, electric. Gabriel's hand moved slightly on the bench, almost, but not quite touching hers. Nora's heart hammered. Then a window opened above them, and Mrs. Fairweather's voice called out something about linens. The moment shattered. They stood quickly, moving apart, both aware they'd come dangerously close to something that couldn't be undone. "Good night, Miss Bell," Gabriel said formally. "Good night, Your Grace." But as Nora climbed the stairs to her room, she knew the careful boundaries she'd drawn were crumbling, and she had no idea how to rebuild them. The outside world intruded a week later, in the form of Gabriel's sister, Lady Margaret Ashford. She arrived in a flurry of expensive silk and barely concealed horror, sweeping through Ravensley Hall like an inspector general. Nora was helping Amelia with watercolours when Lady Margaret found them in the morning room. Gabriel. Lady Margaret's voice could have frozen summer. A word, in private. Through the half-open door of Gabriel's study, Nora heard fragments of the argument that followed. A village widow? Under your roof? Gabriel, have you lost your senses? She's Amelia's governess, and an excellent one. She's a pretty young woman, with a child to provide for, and a duke in her sights. Are you truly so naive? Margaret, I will not hear Miss Bell maligned in her own home. Her home? Good God, you're already thinking of her as family. This is exactly what I feared. What will people say? What about Lady Charlotte? The Pembertons expect... I don't give a damn what the Pembertons expect. The argument continued, but Nora had heard enough. She felt sick. Lady Charlotte, an appropriate aristocratic match. Of course, Gabriel was expected to marry someone suitable, someone who could navigate society with ease, someone who belonged in his world. Not a village dressmaker playing at being governess. That evening, Nora knocked on Gabriel's study door after the children were asleep. Your Grace, I need to speak with you about Lady Margaret's concerns. Gabriel looked exhausted, his cravat loosened, his hair dishevelled from running his hands through it. Miss Bell, my sister is... Right, Nora interrupted quietly. She's right to be concerned. My presence here is causing talk. Amelia is becoming too attached to me, and that's dangerous for everyone. I think perhaps we should consider other arrangements. Gabriel stood abruptly. Are you resigning? I'm suggesting that perhaps I should take Amelia on educational trips with Jamie. Give your household breathing room. Allow you to consider appropriate matches without... Without what? Without the inconvenient governess in the way. Gabriel's voice was harsh, but Nora heard the pain underneath. Miss Bell, if this is about Lady Charlotte, it's about what's appropriate, Your Grace. You're a duke. You have responsibilities to your name, your estate, your daughter's future. I'm just the governess. I need to remember that. And if I don't want you to be just the governess... The words hung between them, dangerous and thrilling and impossible. Nora forced herself to be practical. Then you're not thinking clearly. Good night to Your Grace. She fled before he could respond, before she could say something foolish, like she didn't want to be just the governess either. That night, Amelia heard fragments of the adults' tensions through walls and doorways. She'd been watching carefully all month, seeing how her papa smiled now at breakfast, how Miss Nora's cheeks flushed when he complimented her teaching, how they sat closer at dinner each night. Her plan was working. The grown-ups were falling in love just like they were supposed to. Except now, Aunt Margaret was ruining everything with her talk of appropriate matches and proper ladies, and Miss Nora was talking about leaving. Amelia lay in her bed, her small face set with determination. She whispered through the wall to Jamie, whose room connected to hers through a shared dressing room. Jamie, are you awake? Yes, came his muffled response. The grown-ups are ruining everything. We have to fix this. Amelia, we can't make them fall in love. That's not how it works. It is too how it works. We just have to try harder. Amelia's voice was fierce with 6-year-old certainty. If they won't fix it themselves, we'll have to help them, even if we make mistakes. Through the wall, Jamie groaned. This sounds like big trouble. The best kind of trouble, Amelia assured him. You'll see. 4. Amelia's first attempt was a letter written in her careful, crooked handwriting. She'd heard Aunt Margaret mention Lady Charlotte Pemberton as a suitable bride for Duke Daddy, so Amelia took it upon herself to inform the lady that the position had already been filled. "Dear Lady Charlotte," she wrote, tongue poking out in concentration. "Thank you for wanting to marry my papa, but he has already promised to Miss Bell, who is very nice and makes him smile and reads good stories. Please find another duke. There are lots of them. Signed, Lady Amelia Ravensley." She sealed it with wax she wasn't supposed to touch and left it on the hall table for posting. Unfortunately, Lady Margaret found it first. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. "Gabriel!" Lady Margaret stormed into his study, waving the letter like evidence at a trial. "Your daughter is writing to the Pembertons telling them you're marrying the governess. This has gone beyond inappropriate into outright scandal." Gabriel read the letter, his jaw tightening. "Amelia, come here, now." Amelia appeared looking defiant and slightly worried. "I was helping Papa. You love Miss Nora and she loves you, but you're both being silly about it. So I thought..." "You thought you could arrange people's lives like dolls at a tea party?" Gabriel's voice was sharp with frustration and fear. "Lady Amelia, people's hearts and reputations are not toys for your amusement. Miss Bell is not meant for me. Do you understand?" He'd meant to say that society and circumstances made it impossible. But Amelia heard only one thing. Papa saying Miss Nora wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't meant for their family. Her small face crumpled. "But you said we should always tell the truth, and the truth is you love her." "I see it, Papa. Every time you look at her, you look happy." Gabriel felt something crack inside his chest. But Lady Margaret was watching, and the servants were hovering, and he couldn't have this conversation here, now, like this. "Go to your room, Amelia. We'll discuss this later." Amelia fled, tears streaming down her face. Jamie, who'd been watching from the doorway, shot Gabriel a look of pure reproach and followed her. Lady Margaret rounded on her brother. "This is what comes of bringing that woman into your home. The child is utterly confused about her place in the world." "My daughter is lonely and desperate for a family," Gabriel snapped. "Perhaps if I'd been a better father from the start, none of this would have happened." The argument continued, bitter and circular, until Gabriel dismissed his sister with barely controlled anger and sat alone in his study, head in his hands. Nora learned about the letter from Mrs. Fairweather, who told her gently that perhaps Miss Bell might want to consider other employment before things became more difficult. The kindness in the housekeeper's voice made it worse. Nora found Gabriel in his study that evening. "Your Grace, I'm giving my notice. I'll leave at the end of the month." Gabriel looked up, his face haggard. "Miss Bell, I should have done this sooner. My presence is causing Amelia to behave badly and damaging your family's reputation. I won't be the cause of more problems." Nora's voice was steady, though her heart was breaking. "You need to find a proper governess and consider an appropriate marriage without the complication of having me underfoot. And what about Amelia? What about Jamie? They've become inseparable. You'd tear them apart? Better a clean break now than more pain later." Nora forced herself to be practical. "Children are resilient. She'll adjust." Gabriel stared at her, something desperate and angry flickering in his eyes. "And you? Will you adjust?" The question hung between them, laden with everything they couldn't say. Nora swallowed hard. "I've adjusted to worse, Your Grace. I'll survive this too. Good night." She left before he could see her tears. Amelia heard fragments of the conversation through the door she'd been listening at. Miss Nora was leaving. Papa had said it was perhaps for the best. Her whole plan was collapsing, and it was her fault for sending that stupid letter. She found Jamie in the nursery, already in his nightshirt, reading by lamplight. "Jamie, Miss Nora is leaving, at the end of the month." Jamie looked up, his face stricken. "Because of the letter?" "Because of everything. because Aunt Margaret says we don't belong here and Papa says Miss Nora isn't meant for him and—" Amelia's voice broke. "Jamie, what if they go back to the little cottage in the village and I never see you again? What if everything goes back to how it was before, when I was lonely all the time?" Jamie set down his book, his 7-year-old face unusually serious. "What do you want to do?" "I want them to stop being stupid. I want Papa to tell Miss Nora he loves her, and I want her to stay forever, and I want us to be a real family. But they're not going to do that, Amelia. We can't force grown-ups to love each other." Amelia's mind raced, desperately trying to find a solution to the impossible problem. Then an idea struck, the kind of simple, logical idea that only made sense to a 6-year-old. "Jamie, if Miss Nora goes back to the cottage, then we just have to go with her. We'll all live there together, like I wanted from the beginning." Jamie's eyes widened. "Amelia, that's not how it works. You can't just leave. You're a duke's daughter. But if Papa thinks we've run away to the cottage, he'll have to come get us. And when he sees Miss Nora there, he'll realise he can't live without her. It's perfect." Amelia was already pulling on her day dress over her nightgown. "This is a terrible idea," Jamie said, but he was getting dressed too. "We're going to be in so much trouble. Only if it doesn't work." They crept down the servants' stairs at dawn, when the house was just beginning to stir. Amelia had drawn a map from memory of the route to Nora's old cottage, and she clutched it in one hand while holding Jamie's with the other. "Are you sure about this?" Jamie whispered as they slipped out the kitchen door. "Positive. Come on." The walk to the village was 2 miles, which had seemed perfectly manageable when Amelia planned it in her head. In reality, with morning dew soaking through their shoes and the sun barely risen, it felt much longer. They were perhaps halfway there when the sky darkened ominously. The first drops of rain fell, fat and cold. "Amelia," Jamie said nervously, "maybe we should go back." "We can't go back now. We're already wet." Amelia's voice was less certain than her words. The rain was coming harder now, turning the lane into slick mud. Within minutes, they were soaked through. The wind picked up, driving rain into their faces. Amelia's carefully drawn map dissolved into pulp. Jamie was shivering, and Amelia realised with creeping horror that she'd made a terrible mistake. "There!" Jamie pointed through the rain. "That barn!" They stumbled into the abandoned structure, shaking with cold. The roof leaked in places, but it was better than being completely exposed. Amelia tried to wring water from her dress, tears mixing with rain on her face. "I'm sorry, Jamie. This was a stupid idea." "Maybe a little bit stupid," Jamie admitted, his teeth chattering. "But you were trying to help." At Ravensley Hall, the morning erupted into chaos. Mrs. Fairweather came to wake the children for breakfast and found empty beds. She checked the nursery, the schoolroom, the gardens, growing increasingly frantic. When she couldn't find them, she went straight to Gabriel. He was drinking coffee in his study when Mrs. Fairweather burst in, her face white with fear. "Your Grace, Lady Amelia and young Master Bell are missing. Their beds weren't slept in, and no one's seen them since last night." The coffee cup shattered against the floor. Gabriel was on his feet instantly, barking orders. Footmen were dispatched to search the grounds and stables. Mr. Price organised the staff into search parties. Lady Margaret, who'd stayed overnight, began wringing her hands and wailing about kidnapping. Nora appeared in the doorway of Gabriel's study, her face pale with terror. "The children are gone?" Gabriel looked at her, and Nora saw raw fear in his eyes, the same fear she felt clawing at her own chest. "I'm riding out to search. Will you—" "I'm coming with you." Nora was already moving toward the door. "I know where they might have gone." Where? My old cottage. Jamie knows the way. If Amelia convinced him to run away, that's where they'd go. Gabriel didn't question her instinct. He simply grabbed his riding coat and followed her to the stables. They rode out together as the sky opened up, rain pouring down in sheets that turned the world grey and terrifying. Nora's mind raced with horrible possibilities. 2 small children alone in a storm. Jamie couldn't swim well. Amelia had never been exposed to real weather or danger. If anything happened to them, if they were hurt or lost or... "We'll find them," Gabriel said, as if reading her thoughts. His voice was rough with emotion. "We have to." They searched the lane toward the village, calling the children's names into the wind. Nora's dress was plastered to her body, her hair hanging in wet ropes, but she barely noticed the discomfort. All she could think about was Jamie's scared face and Amelia's desperate need to fix the adults' problems. "There," Gabriel pointed toward an old barn set back from the road. "Light in the window." They dismounted and ran through the mud. Gabriel reached the barn first, throwing open the door. Inside, 2 small soaking children huddled together, trying to dry their clothes by wringing them out. When Amelia saw her father, her face crumpled with relief and fear. "Papa, I'm sorry. I just wanted..." Gabriel crossed the space in 3 strides and swept Amelia into his arms, crushing her against his chest. His whole body shook. "You could have died. Do you understand that? You could have gotten lost or hurt or..." Nora grabbed Jamie, checking him frantically for injuries. "What were you thinking? You know better than to leave without telling anyone." "We were trying to help." Jamie's voice was small and miserable. "Amelia thought if we went to the cottage, His Grace would come find us there with you, and then you'd all realise you should stay together." The words hung in the rain-soaked air of the barn. Gabriel looked at Nora over the children's heads, and something passed between them, grief and fear and understanding. "We're taking you both home," Gabriel said firmly. "And we will discuss this later when everyone is warm and dry and safe." But as they prepared to leave, Gabriel noticed Nora was shaking violently, her lips tinged blue. She'd been riding through freezing rain without proper protection, and shock was setting in. "Miss Bell, you're hypothermic." "I'm fine. We need to get the children back." "The children are wet, but mobile. You're barely standing." Gabriel made a decision. "We can't ride back in this storm anyway. We shelter here until it passes." He stripped off his riding coat and wrapped it around Nora, then pulled off his waistcoat to wrap around Amelia. Jamie got Gabriel's wool scarf. They huddled together in the driest corner of the barn, listening to rain pound against the roof. In the forced intimacy of survival, with the children pressed between them and danger temporarily at bay, something in Gabriel broke. "You can't leave," he said suddenly, his voice rough. "I can't, Nora. I can't watch you walk away." Nora's breath caught at his use of her first name. "Your Grace?" "Gabriel, please, just Gabriel." His eyes were intense, desperate. "When Mrs. Fairweather told me the children were gone, all I could think was that I'd already lost too much. My wife, and then the years with Amelia, because I was too afraid to love her properly, and now possibly my daughter and your son, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too. Gabriel, I'm the governess. This is impossible. I don't care." The words came out fierce, final. "I don't care what society thinks, or what's expected, or what my sister believes is appropriate. I've spent 6 years being the proper Duke, doing everything right, being everything everyone needed, and I've been miserable. Then you walked into my library with your dignity and your honesty, and you taught my daughter to laugh again, and you made me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just a title." Tears streamed down Nora's face. "You don't know what you're saying. The scandal. Let there be scandal. Let them talk. I would rather be gossiped about for loving you than praised for living half a life without you. Gabriel's hand found hers in the darkness. I'm asking you to stay, not as the governess, as my wife, as Amelia's mother, as Jamie's father, as my partner in everything. Amelia, who'd been listening with wide eyes, whispered, See, Jamie? I told you it would work. Despite everything, Nora laughed through her tears. This is madness. Is it? Gabriel's thumb traced circles on her cold hand. Or is it the first sane thing I've done in years? Your family will be furious. Your peers will call me a fortune hunter. Jamie will grow up bearing the stigma of being a tradesman's son raised in a duke's household. Or Jamie will grow up knowing he's loved and valued regardless of his birth. Or my family will learn to accept what makes me happy. Or my peers will realize the world is changing, and love matters more than bloodlines. Gabriel pulled her closer. Nora, I can't promise you it will be easy, but I can promise you'll never face it alone. I can promise I'll defend you and Jamie with everything I have. I can promise I'll choose you every single day over every expectation that's ever been placed on me. Nora looked at him, this man who'd been buried in grief and duty, who'd learned to smile again because of his daughter's desperate scheme, who was offering her everything despite the cost. I'm terrified, she whispered. So am I. Gabriel's smile was soft, vulnerable. Be terrified with me, but say yes. Nora thought about Jamie's face when he played with Amelia, about Gabriel's laugh in the orchard, about the way this strange assembled family had somehow become home. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I'll marry you, Gabriel Ravensley. Amelia's delighted squeal echoed through the barn. Jamie groaned, but was grinning. And Gabriel kissed Nora there, in the rain-soaked darkness, with two soggy children cheering, and it felt like the beginning of something impossible and real and utterly right. 5. The storm passed. They rode back to Ravensley Hall, wet and bedraggled, but strangely elated. The household erupted with relief when they appeared, servants exclaiming over the children while Lady Margaret stood frozen in the entrance hall, taking in the scene with mounting horror. Gabriel dismounted, helped Nora down, and kept hold of her hand in full view of everyone. Margaret's servants, please join me in the great hall. I have an announcement to make. 10 minutes later, the household assembled with varying degrees of confusion and curiosity. Gabriel stood at the centre with Nora beside him, both of them still damp from the storm, their clasped hands impossible to miss. Lady Margaret's face was stone. Gabriel, what is the meaning of this? Gabriel's voice rang out clear and firm. I owe several apologies. First, to my daughter, for allowing my grief to make me a distant father, for forcing her to become so desperate for love that she tried to purchase it. Amelia, I'm sorry. I should have been better. Amelia, wrapped in blankets and drinking hot chocolate, nodded solemnly. Second, to Miss Bell. Gabriel turned to look at Nora, his expression open and honest in a way the staff had never seen. For not protecting you adequately from unkind words, and for allowing my own fear to make me push you away. You came here as an employee, and I've asked you to become something much more complicated. Whispers rippled through the assembled servants. Lady Margaret's hand went to her throat. Gabriel continued. Regardless of Miss Bell's decision about my proposal, I am settling a secure income and property tenancy on her and her son for life. They will have financial security, whether or not they remain at Ravensley Hall. This is not a bargain or a payment. It's simply what they deserve for the joy they've brought to this household. Mr. Price's eyebrows rose. This was unprecedented, generous to the point of scandal, and completely typical of the Duke they'd all been watching transform over the past month. However, Gabriel's voice softened. I've also asked Miss Bell to marry me. Not because Amelia paid her £100, or because society expects anything, but because somewhere between ledgers and arguments, and watching her teach my daughter to laugh, I fell completely in love with her. The silence was absolute. Lady Margaret looked like she might faint. The servants exchanged shocked glances. This was the scandal of the decade unfolding in real time. Nora stepped forward, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. I have concerns, Your Grace. Gabriel, he corrected gently. Gabriel. Nora took a breath. I'm afraid of the gossip. Afraid of being called a fortune hunter. Afraid Jamie will suffer because his mother married above her station. Afraid I'll never truly belong in your world. Gabriel squeezed her hand. Those are fair fears, so let me address them publicly, in front of witnesses, so everyone hears my answers. He turned to face the assembled household. Anyone who suggests Miss Bell manipulated this situation will be immediately corrected. I pursued her. I asked her to stay. I proposed marriage. She repeatedly tried to maintain proper boundaries, and I repeatedly demolished them because I wanted her presence in my life more than I wanted to maintain comfortable distance. Lady Margaret made a strangled sound. Gabriel ignored her. As for Jamie Bell, Gabriel's gaze found the boy, who was watching with huge eyes. Jamie will be educated as my son in everything but name. He will be introduced to society as part of this family. He will inherit property and support. Anyone who treats him as lesser will answer to me directly. Jamie's eyes filled with tears. Nora's hand tightened on Gabriel's. As for belonging, Gabriel's voice roughened with emotion. Nora, you've belonged here from the moment you walked into my library and handed back money you desperately needed because your integrity mattered more than your comfort. You belong here more than I do, because you've remembered what I forgot, that love and laughter and genuine human connection matter more than titles or bloodlines or social approval. He turned back to Nora. I would rather be thought eccentric than live another year half alive. I would rather face society's judgment with you beside me than face their approval alone. So I'm asking you again, publicly, in front of everyone who'll gossip about it anyway. Will you marry me? The great hall held its breath. Nora looked at Gabriel, at this man who was offering everything despite the cost. Then she looked at Jamie, who was nodding encouragingly, and at Amelia, who was practically vibrating with hope. She thought about the £100 Amelia had laid on her counter weeks ago, about the childish contract that had started this impossible chain of events, about how love sometimes came from the strangest places when you stopped trying to control it. I have one condition, Nora said finally. Name it. We stay who we are. You still ride horses with the stable boys. I still speak my mind. Both children are treated as equal parts of this family, regardless of blood. We don't pretend to be something we're not just to please people who'll judge us anyway. Gabriel's smile could have lit the room. Deal? Anything else? Actually, yes. Nora's eyes sparkled. Amelia's £100 goes into a trust for her future. When she's older, she can use it however she chooses. But she should know that the best things in life can't be bought. They can only be chosen freely. Amelia piped up from her blanket cocoon. Does that mean you're saying yes? Nora laughed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Lady Amelia, I'm saying yes. The room erupted. Servants applauded. Mrs. Fairweather dabbed at her eyes. Even Mr. Price cracked a smile. Jamie whooped and hugged his mother fiercely. Only Lady Margaret remained frozen, her face a mask of disapproval and disbelief. Gabriel turned to his sister. Margaret, I love you, but if you cannot accept my choice, you're welcome to leave my home. Lady Margaret's mouth opened and closed. She looked at Gabriel's determined face, at Nora's quiet dignity, at Amelia's radiant joy. Something shifted in her expression, not acceptance exactly, but perhaps the beginning of resignation. You're truly determined to do this? To weather the scandal? It's not scandal if it's honest, Gabriel said simply. And yes, I'm determined. Lady Margaret sighed, suddenly looking tired rather than angry. Then I suppose I'll have to learn to live with having a sister-in-law who used to be a dressmaker. Heaven help us all. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't rejection either. It was enough, for now. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the estate chapel. It was small, intimate, with only people who genuinely wished them well in attendance. Some aristocratic families stayed away, scandalized by the match. Others came out of curiosity and left charmed by how genuinely happy the couple looked. Nora wore a simple cream dress she'd made herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Gabriel couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle. Not as a governess this time, but as his chosen partner, his equal, his love. Amelia and Jamie stood together as witnesses, beaming with pride. When the vicar pronounced Gabriel and Nora husband and wife, Amelia whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "See, Jamie? I told you my plan would work." Jamie grinned. "You also told me we'd end up in huge trouble." "We did, but it was worth it." The wedding breakfast was held in Ravensley Hall's gardens, with tables set under the trees and food enough for the household staff and village families who'd supported them. It was utterly unconventional, mixing classes in a way that would have scandalized London society. Gabriel didn't care. He stood with his arm around Nora's waist, watching Jamie and Amelia chase each other through the orchard, and felt more content than he'd been in 6 years. "No regrets?" he murmured to Nora. "Dozens," she said, smiling. "But none about you." Later that afternoon, after the guests had departed and the children were napping off their excitement, Gabriel and Nora took a walk through the gardens. They ended up at the bench where they'd first talked alone, where Gabriel had confessed his grief and Nora had shared her fears. "I have something for you," Gabriel said, pulling a small object from his pocket. It was a leather-bound book, elegantly made but small enough to fit in one hand. Nora opened it to find Amelia's original contract carefully preserved on the first page, followed by blank pages. "A family chronicle," Gabriel explained. "I thought we could fill it together. Record the important moments, the ordinary days, the arguments and reconciliations. Everything that makes a real family, not just a fairy tale." Nora's eyes stung with happy tears. "It's perfect." On the second page, Gabriel had already written something in his elegant handwriting. Nora read it aloud. "One new family. Value, beyond counting. Paid to Lady Amelia Ravensley in exchange for £100, one crooked contract, and a very brave heart. The best investment any duke ever made," Gabriel added. Nora laughed and kissed him. "I wasn't bought, you know. I was simply given the chance to love where I already wanted to." Months passed. The scandal faded as new gossip replaced old. Some doors remained closed to them, but new ones opened progressive families who valued authenticity over rigid convention. Younger couples inspired by their example. Amelia and Jamie grew up together, siblings in every way that mattered. Jamie received the education Nora had dreamed of for him, eventually studying law at Cambridge. Amelia grew into a fierce young woman who challenged every expectation placed on Duke's daughters. Gabriel and Nora built a partnership that balanced duty with joy, tradition with change. They fought sometimes over estate decisions, over the children's education, over how much scandal was too much scandal, but they always came back together, choosing each other again and again. One afternoon, 5 years after that first improbable proposal in a dressmaker's shop, the family gathered in the garden for a summer picnic. Gabriel was teaching 11-year-old Amelia to ride. Nora was helping 12-year-old Jamie with his Latin translation. The sun was warm, the grass was green, and everything felt perfectly, ordinarily wonderful. Amelia approached her parents with a dented tin box she'd kept hidden in her room. "Papa, Mama, I want to show you something." Inside was her original contract, now yellow with age, along with a small ledger where she'd recorded family purchases in her childish handwriting. The first entry read, "One mother, one father, one brother, paid £100, best bargain ever." Gabriel ruffled her hair. "You know I'm supposed to teach you better financial sense than thinking you can buy people, don't you?" "I didn't buy you," Amelia said, with the wisdom of 11 years. "I just gave you all an excuse to choose each other. Sometimes people need an excuse to be brave." Nora pulled her daughter close. "That's true, darling. You gave us permission to want what we already wanted. That was quite a gift." "So the £100 was an investment?" Amelia's eyes gleamed with mischief. "The best investment any of us ever made," Gabriel agreed. They sat together in the garden. This assembled family built on a child's desperate scheme and two adults' courage to love despite the cost. Not a fairy tale, but something better, a real, complicated, joyful life they'd chosen together. And somewhere in the chapel, carefully preserved in a glass case, sat a crooked contract written by a 6-year-old girl who'd been wise enough to know that sometimes the most important business deals are the ones that can't be calculated in pounds and pence, but only measured in laughter and love and the warmth of belonging. The Duke and Duchess of Ravensley lived exactly as they'd promised, still themselves, still choosing each other, still proving that the best families aren't always the ones you're born into, but the ones you're brave enough to build.